Hey everybody, Mark here. I'm at lunch right now, so I figured why not do a live video from my car to give beginners 5 quick tips that they might need to know. Sound like a good time to do it? Why not? There'll definitely be some other volumes of this in the future, but I was thinking about you guys at lunch, so I thought there's 5 things that bubble to the top every time I talk to beginners, and here's 5 quick things that I want to share with you. Number 1, Glowforge provides a document that you should work through called your first 3 prints. The question is, should you do those? The answer is yes. So many times I talk to beginners and they have questions and I ask them, hey, did you do the first 3 prints? And they say, no, I skipped that. And so many times the answer to their question is answered in their first 3 prints if they would have done them. So please, number 1, if you're a beginner, do the first 3 prints. There's a reason for it. Go ahead and do it. Just trust me. All right. Number 2 tip for beginners. If you're going to cut new materials that you've never cut before, I recommend that you cut a set of different squares. Let me tell you what I mean. I recommend that you get into Inkscape or Illustrator or whatever you use and make 3 or 4 1-inch squares in your vector application, and then make them each different colors like red, blue, green, yellow. Just make 4 squares, save that as an SVG or a PDF, and then upload that to the Glowforge interface. Then you can choose each one of those squares and give it different instructions. So you say, I want this one to be cut at full power and 200 speed. I want the next one to be cut at full power and 180 speed, and so on. So you can cut 4 different squares at the same time, and then you can see how each one works, and you can quickly find what settings you need to use to cut through your material. Now, hopefully, if you do 4 different squares, you won't have to do any more testing. But if you do, you can do another 4 squares, and you'll get the answer really, really quick. So, tip number 2, cut some squares first before you jump into trying to cut a big design. That way, you will know what that material requires and write that down. All right? So, tip number 3 for beginners. When you load a file into the Glowforge interface, it doesn't matter what function it defaults to. For example, if you load it and it defaults to cut instead of engrave, guess what? Don't push the blue button, or don't push the glowing button. Change it to be cut or score. In other words, don't just go with whatever it defaults to. If you need it to do something, change it. So often I have people message me and say, hey, I loaded one of your designs and it cut instead of engraved. And I think, well, choose the function that you want it to do. Don't just let it go. So my tip number 3 for beginners is choose the function you want. Don't just go with whatever the default is. It's really easy. Just click it there on the side and choose what you want. All right. Change it if you don't like the default. Tip number 4, if you are using somebody else's file, everybody listen, look at my face, look at me. If you're using somebody else's file, measure, 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 and when you get done, measure your materials. I cannot tell you how often I see somebody say, hey, I bought your file or I downloaded this free one and it doesn't fit. And I asked them, well, what thickness of material was the file made for? And I don't know, I'll have to look. So key number 1, look at what the file was made for. And key number 2 is measure your materials. And if it's not the same size as the file was made for, then you're going to have to do some adjustments, okay? But it's your responsibility to measure the material before you start cutting, all right? Now, if you don't know what to do after that, we can help you, but measure, 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 okay? So tip number 4, if you're using somebody else's file, measure first. And tip number 5, you ready for this? This is super easy, but again, it goes to files, whether you're downloading free ones or buying ones. Read the descriptions. I write a lot of descriptions in mine. I know other people do too. And a lot of times the questions that you have are answered in the descriptions. But I can't tell you how many times per week I get somebody asking me a question. I say, did you read the instructions or the description? And they say, no, I didn't. Well, that's what it's there for. So I want this list to help you. This is only 5. And I'm going to make a lot more in the future, but these are just the ones that I've dealt with in the last few weeks with people. So real quick, number 1, do the first 3 prints. Number 2, do some test square cutting to figure out what kind of power you need on a new material. Number 3, it doesn't matter what the function defaults to. You can change it before you start. Number 4, if you're using somebody else's file, measure, measure, measure. And number 5, read the descriptions. Those will really help you. So anyway, that's Mark's tips at lunch. So that's volume 1. We'll come back with volume 2 and some more later. But thanks for watching. And yeah, talk to you guys again soon.